Hey, so this is Hayden. I'm going to be showing you some of the important information that you'll see in the Artisan graph as you're roasting. The first thing I want to take a look at is going to be the roasting curve, right? That's this red line. And that is going to tell us, using this scale to the left, where the roast is at any particular moment. This scale on the bottom is going to tell you where the roast at is far as time. And so you can see this is the beginning of the roast. Now this isn't always completely accurate. It says 401. Sometimes if you drop it at 405, by the time the computer registers, it's going to hit it at 401. So don't necessarily think that if a roast says drop at 405 to charge it to get the roast started, when it registers as 401, that's the start point. That just is when it started to pick up at the computer. So we have this is called the charge temperature. This is what the temperature of the thermocouple is as we're dropping the coffee into it to get it started.
Which is this guy where the beans are.
Now this is another important piece of information. This is the turning point, right? And we see that there is going to be a temperature readout, and there's also going to be a time readout, and it says TP right there. So typically we want this to be right around 132 to 135. That's a rough estimate, but you know that your roast is way too hot if you hit like 126, right? Because we're thinking 132, 135, right in there gives us an idea of how fast the coffee is changing temperature. So this is an important thing to notice. If this were to hit, right, you drop the coffee in, the turning point happens at 1 minute and 26 seconds, I would recommend turning the heat down because you're going way too fast. If for some reason this said 1 minute 42, there's a good chance you're going way too slow. You're going to want to turn that up. So that's going to give you a gauge. This turning point is as to where you're starting off within the first minute and a half, and if you're going too fast. The next thing I want to hone in on, this is called the rate of rise curve, and it's in blue. This is how many degrees Fahrenheit is this coffee gaining per minute. Some are set to 30 seconds, this is per minute. This gives us a good idea of how fast we're going, because typically we see if it were to be way up here, say it went over 400, right? I would know that that we're going way too fast. But you can see that it's 350, 360, 370, 375 is about where that's at. If you can kind of start to get an idea of where this should top off, then you know that if it goes up to 400, you're going too fast, or if it was down at 350, you're going too slow. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for to tell how far I'm going. A general rule for the rate of rise, which is important to realize it's general, you do have to break this rule about 10% of the time, is that you always want this, after you hit this peak, you always want this rate of rise to be descending. Now you can see that there's a little spike right here, right around 300, right? And that's because the coffee has gone from sucking into heat, to giving out heat. It's gone from endothermic to exothermic. And the way that we're going to try and curb this in the future is by turning the gas down right around 295, so that when it gets to the place where it wants to spike, it'll kind of even out. One of the rules, one of the roasts you'll probably see yourself breaking this in particular is going to be the French roast. So that's one of the things, and you're not breaking it here, you're going to be breaking it probably at the end of the roast. You might have to curve it up. So the next thing I want to talk about is this time here, right? We have the green, the yellow, the brown, and then we have some corresponding colors, and you're able to set these. This brown is going to be once you've gotten into first crack, and this yellow is going to be once you've hit 300, and then of course the green is when you're still in the beginning phase, you haven't had any color change. The last curve I want to talk about is going to be this green one, and that's not terribly important, but just to give you an idea of what that is, that's the exhaust air temp. So that's not in the bean, but that's the air that's leaving the roaster. And that, for this purpose, once the roast is going, is not necessarily important. The main things that are important, the two main things, and they're charted here, is when you hit 300, right, because that's a benchmark. When you hit your first crack, you want to be within 15 seconds of your goal every time, right? So if my goal was 9:15 and I hit 9:04, that's not ideal, but it's acceptable,
Okay.
right? And then, of course, your development percentage is the time between first crack and dropping the roast. This percentage is important, and also the time that you end is important. So you want to really try and get those. I try and keep them tight within 15 seconds, and I really, if everything's going well, I'm hitting those time after time again, and it's totally doable. And so that's the roast curve, and I think we can end the video here.